Right, so your quiz tomorrow is going to be on 9.1 and 9.2. So that is circles, parabolas, and ellipses. So there's about 2 questions from every type. So I'm going to do one of each, and then if we have time at the end, I'll come back and do another one. But from 1 and 2, any suggestions on which one? All right, let's do number 2. So here we have to find the standard form of the equation of a circle with the given information. So we're given the center and a point on the circle. So we always want to start off with the formula for the standard form of the equation of a circle. So that would be x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. Do I have anything that I can plug in right away? What? I have the center, which is h and k, so I can plug those in. And then do I have anything else? What? I can plug in my x and y to solve for the radius. Perfect. So I'm going to plug in h, k, x, and y. So I have 4 minus 2 squared plus 5 minus negative 5 squared is equal to r squared. So 2 squared, this becomes 10 squared. 2 squared is 4, plus 100. So r squared is 104. So when I plug that into my standard form is going to have x and y in it. Everything else needs to get plugged in. So I have to plug in my h, k, and r squared. So I have x minus h, which is 2 squared, plus y minus k, so that would be plus 5, since k is negative 5, squared, and then that's equal to r squared, which is 104. So that's my standard form. And we would do the same thing for number 1 too, just with different numbers. Let's do 3. So how do I find the x-intercept? Plug in 0 for y. So I have x plus 7 squared plus 0 minus 3 squared is equal to 5. So x plus 7 squared, this would be negative 3 squared, which is 9, is equal to 5. What can I do next? Subtract 9 from both sides. So x plus 7 squared is equal to negative 4. And then what can I do? Take the square root of both sides. Can I take the square root of negative 4 and get a real number? No. So I have an x-intercept? No. So since I'm taking the square root of a negative number, when you take the square root, you get an imaginary number, so that means there is no x-intercept. You don't have to. If you were to FOIL this out, then you would do the quadratic and you'd get a negative under the square root. Same thing, yeah. You'd get the same answer if you did the quadratic formula. I think that doing the quadratic is just more work, so I would just say move the constants to one side, take the square root of both sides. All right, and let's find our y-intercept. So for the y-intercept, I plug in 0 for x. So 0 plus 7 squared plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 5. So 0 plus 7 is 7. 7 squared is 49. Plus y minus 3 squared is equal to 5. What should I do next? Subtract 49 on both sides. So that would give me negative 44. So I would take the square root of both sides. Again, I'm taking the square root of a negative number. Can't do that. So there would be no y-intercept. But make sure if you have an intercept, it's a point. So like your x-intercept, you're plugging in 0 for y, so it would be a number, comma 0. Your y-intercept, you're plugging in 0 for x, so it would be 0, comma, a number. So if you had an intercept, make sure you list it as a coordinate point. All right. So for number 6, we have to write the equation of a circle in standard form, identify the center and the radius. So again, we have a circle. So we're going to use our circle formula, which is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So we want this equation here to be in this form. So we have to get it to look like that. So what should I do first? Do what? I can move the 9 over, so I'm going to subtract 9 on both sides. What else can I do? Rearrange it. Why? To do what? I want to complete the square. So I'm going to put my x's together. So I have x squared plus 12x. And then I'm going to leave a space to complete the square. And I'm going to have to complete the square with my y's too. So I'm going to write my y's together. So y squared minus 8y. I'll leave a space there. So first, let's complete the square with the x's. What's that formula that I used to complete the square? B over 2 squared. And what's my b for the x's? 12. So this would be 12 over 2 squared. 12 over 2 would be 6. 6 squared is 36. So what's going to go into my parentheses squared?
X plus 6.
Awesome. X plus 6. And then what do I do with the 36? I have to make sure I add it to the other side also. We're going to do the same thing with the y's. So again, I have b over 2 squared. What's my b here? Negative 8. So negative 8 over 2 squared. Negative 8 over 2 is negative 4. And what's negative 4 squared? 16. So I'm adding 16 on the left side. I also have to make sure I add 16 on the right side too. And then in my parentheses squared, what's going to go inside? Y minus 4. Perfect. And then that's equal to negative 9 plus 36 plus 16. So that should be 43. So that's my standard form. And then I also have to identify the center and the radius. So what would my center be? Perfect. Negative 6, 4. Because that comes from our h and k, but we changed the signs. And then what's my radius? Square root of 43. Remember, 43 is r squared. So to find what just r is, I take the square root of both sides. If you can simplify it, but we can't simplify the square root of 43. So number 1, we have to find the standard form of the equation of a circle with the given information. So it gives me the center and the point on the circle. So my standard form of a circle is perfect. Equals r squared. So I have my h and k. So I can plug those in. I don't have r squared. How can I find r squared? I can find the distance between the center and the point. So I could use the distance formula. What I think would be a little bit easier would be just to use your point as x and y and plug that into your standard form and find r squared. So I plug in hk, x, and y. And that'll give me r squared. So I have 5 minus 3, which would be 2 squared. And 5 plus 2 would be 7 squared. So 4 plus 49 is equal to r squared. Yes.
Would there ever be like a situation where like you would have to use the distance formula and not this?
So r squared is 53. You don't have to take the square root of 53 because it's just r squared that goes into our standard form. So I'm going to plug in hk and r squared. So I have x minus 3 squared plus y. So it'll be plus 2 because it'll be minus negative 2. So plus 2 squared is equal to 53. That's our standard form. So how do I find the x-intercept? Plug in 0 for y. So I have x minus 1 squared plus 0 plus 4 squared is equal to 39. So x minus 1 squared, this will be 4 squared, which is 16, is equal to 39. What should I do next? Subtract 16. So x minus 1 squared is equal to 23. What's next? Take the square root of both sides. So x minus 1 is equal to what? Plus or minus the square root of 23. I knew you knew it. You just had to say it. And then what's the last step? Add the 1 to the other side. So x is equal to 1 plus or minus square root 23. So my x-intercept, I plugged in 0 for y, so this is going to be the x, so plus or minus 1 plus or minus square root 23, comma 0. So this is how you would write your x-intercept, as a point.
It's not minus.
Find the y. So how do I find the y-intercept? Plug in 0 for x. So 0 minus 1 squared plus y plus 4 squared is equal to 39. So negative 1 squared would be 1 plus y plus 4 squared is equal to 39. What should I do next? Subtract the 1. So y plus 4 squared is equal to 38. What's next? Square root both sides. So y plus 4 is equal to? Plus or minus square root 38. Always make sure that you can't simplify your radical. If you can, make sure you simplify it. 38, it would just be 2 and 19, so you can't simplify. So what's next? Subtract 4 on both sides. So I would write my answer as, yep, 0 comma negative 4 plus or minus square root 38. And that is my y-intercept. So standard form of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared is equal to r squared. So I need to get this equation to look like this one. So what do I need to do? Complete the square. And subtract 9. So I'm going to move the 9 over to the other side, and then I'll complete the square. So x squared minus 16x. I'm going to leave a space there to complete the square with the x's. Then I have y squared plus 4y. Leave a space there. And it equals negative 9. What is that handy-dandy little formula I use to help me complete the square? B over 2 squared. Yeah, if you wanted to put parentheses. You're just working with the x's, and then you're just working with the y's. So for the x's, what's my b? Negative 16. So I have negative 16 over 2 squared. So this would be negative 8 squared. What's negative 8 squared? 64. So what's going to go into my parentheses squared down here? X minus 8. So it's always whatever is squared here and whatever is squared here. Yes.
So you know how you have to add to
Mm-hmm.
what if it had the instead of just putting your x squared, there was like a 2 so you would multiply that times 64 and then put it.
Yep. So if you had a number that you took out here, you would have to make sure you multiply it and then add that number to the other side. All right, so next we're going to complete the square with the y's. So again, I have b over 2 squared. What's my b here? So 4 over 2 squared, which would be 2 squared. And 2 squared is 4. So I'm adding 4 on the left side. So I have to make sure I add 4 on the right side too. So what's going to go into my parentheses squared here? Y plus 2. So remember, it's what's squared here and what's squared here. And then that's going to be equal to all 3 of these added together. And that's my standard form. And then this also asks for the center and the radius. So what would my center be?
8 times 2.
Perfect. 8 comma negative 2. So you flip the sign of your h and k. And then what's my radius? Awesome. 59 is r squared. So take the square root to find the radius. So r is equal to square root 59. If you can simplify it, simplify it. No. So for number 7, we have to find the standard form of the parabola from the given info. So let's start with what we have. So I'm going to graph my vertex and my directrix. Again, you don't have to graph, but it'll help so you can see it. So my vertex is at negative 5, 6. So go to the left, negative 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and up 6. My directrix is x is equal to negative 2. So I go to where x is negative 2, so I go to the left 2 and put a line through that point. Make sure you know the difference between x is equal to and y is equal to. So if it's x is equal to, it's a vertical line. If it's y, it's going to be a horizontal line. So which direction does my parabola have to open?
To the left.
It opens to the left because it opens away from the directrix. You're never going to cross that line of the directrix. So if my parabola opens to the left, is it going to be an x squared or a y squared? Y is going to be squared. So the formula I'm going to use is y minus k squared is equal to 4p times x minus h. And I know it's the y squared one because it opens left. So if it opens left or right, it's going to be the y squared. Now, I have h and k, so I can plug those in because my vertex is h comma k. So your k always sticks with the y. Even though here, k is coming before h in your standard form, k always goes with the y. So it'll be y minus 6 squared is equal to 4p times x minus h, so that'll be plus 5. Now I need to figure out what p is. What is p? So p is the distance from the vertex to the focus, which is the same distance as the vertex to the directrix. So I'll say, or vertex to directrix. So because I graphed it, I can just count how many spaces I go from the vertex to the directrix. So I go 1, 2, 3.
Is P always positive?
P is not always positive. How do we know if it's going to be positive or negative? So if your graph opens left, P is going to be negative because P is the distance from the vertex to the focus. If it's negative, that means we go in the negative direction, which is left. So we would go to the left 3 to put our focus. So P has to be negative 3. So when your graph opens left, P is negative. So P is negative 3. I have to multiply that times 4 because that's what my equation calls for 4P. So it'll be negative 12. And that's standard form. Yes. So I'll make a little note here. So P is negative. When the graph opens to the left, or down. So if your parabola opens up or down, then the x is squared. If the parabola opens left or right, then the y is squared. All right, let's look at 10. So I have to put this in standard form. So I'm going to start with my standard form equation. How do I know if I'm going to use the x squared one or the y squared one here? I use the x squared one because my x is squared. So it's going to be x minus h squared is equal to 4p times y minus k. So I need to get this equation to look like this. So what do I need to do? I'm going to move over the 4y and the 7, and then what am I going to do with the x's? I'm going to need to complete the square. So I'm going to add 4y to both sides and add 7 to both sides.
Ms. Carver, on the quiz, it's going to give us, like focus, what's the focus, directed, and vertex.
All right, so to complete the square now, what's the formula that I use? B over 2 squared, and what's my b here? 6. So 6 over 2 squared. 6 over 2 would be 3. And 3 squared is 9. So in my parentheses squared down here, what do I put? X plus 3 squared. And what else do I have to do? Add 9 to the other side also. So then that's equal to 4y plus 16. Now my equation almost looks just like the first one, my standard form. I have the left side down, I have the parentheses there, but I don't have the parentheses on the right side. So what do I need to do to get it to look like this now? Take the 4 out. So my left side's perfect, I have x plus 3 squared. And then I'm just going to divide both of these by 4 and pull it out on the outside. So 4y plus 4. So this is my standard form. So now that I have my standard form, I can find my vertex. What's my vertex? -3, -4. What is my directrix? Well, let's graph it, and maybe that'll help us with the directrix and the focus. So I have -3, -4, so go to the left 3, down 4. Put a point there. Remember, this number that gets multiplied to the parentheses on the right, that is 4p. So if 4p is equal to 4, what is p? 1. Does my graph open up or down here? Or left or right?
It opens up.
It opens up because p is positive and because x is squared. So since x is squared, we know it's going to open up and p is positive, so smiley face. P, again, is the distance from the vertex to the focus. So I go up 1. And P is the distance from the vertex to the directrix. So that would be down 1. So looking at my graph, I can just look at the point that I put on there for the focus. So I went to the left, -3, and down 3. And then what would my directrix be? Negative. Remember, directrix is a line. Y is equal to -5. Because on the y-axis, I cross -5. So that's why it's y is equal to -5. We have to find the standard form of the ellipse with the given characteristics. So I like to start by graphing, even though it doesn't tell us to graph, but it kind of helps us see what we're working with. So my foci are at 2, 1, so I'd go to the right 2, up 1, and 10, 1. So the right 10, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and up 1. Do I have a horizontal ellipse or a vertical ellipse? Horizontal, because my focus are on a horizontal line, I know I'm going to have a horizontal ellipse. So I'm just going to write my standard form so I know what I need to find. So it'll be x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared is equal to 1. A is going to go under x, so A is going to be the bigger number that goes under our x because it is a horizontal ellipse. Do I know how to find my center? Do I know what h and k are? How do I find that? I can do the midpoint formula of the foci, or since I graphed it, I can just look at it. I know that there's 8 spaces in between 2 and 10, so that would mean halfway would be 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Or you can do the midpoint formula. So what would my center be at? Center would be 6, 1. Perfect. So that's h and k. So I can plug those in. So I have the minor axis length, which that'll help me find B. So I know minor axis length is the length of the whole minor axis. So what would just the length of the center to one point on the minor axis be? 8. It would be half of that. So we take our minor axis length and divide it by 2. So that would give us 8. What is 8? B. Because we're dealing with the minor axis. So B is 8. What else do I have? I don't have A, but how can I find A? I can use the foci. So I'm going to use my formula c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared. I have B. I'm trying to find A. Do I have C? What is C?
The distance from one of the foci
So C is the distance from the center to the foci. So I could just count 1, 2, 3, 4. So C would be 4. So I can plug in B and C to find A. So I have C squared, which is 16, is equal to A squared minus B squared, which would be 64. Add 64 to both sides. So this would be 80. It's equal to A squared. In my formula, I just need to plug in A squared. So I don't actually have to take the square root of it. You could if you wanted to find A. You don't have to, because in here, we're going to put A squared, which is 80. And then what was my B squared? 64, because I found B is 8, so B squared is 64. So that's my standard form. So a couple things to remember. 2 times A is going to be the length of the major. And 2 times B is the length of the minor. And then also we found the center by doing, we just looked at it to find the midpoint of the foci, but our midpoint formula would be x1 plus x2 over 2 and y1 plus y2 over 2. So that would be to find the center. But again, you don't need it because you could just see it and find where the middle is. But if you wanted to, just to double check your work and plug it into the midpoint formula, you could. So for 13, we have to find the standard form of the equation of the ellipse. So my standard form for an ellipse is x minus h squared over a squared is plus y minus k squared over b squared is equal to 1. Now we don't know if it's going to be a horizontal or vertical ellipse, but when we evaluate the equation, the bigger number is either going to be under the x or y, so it doesn't really matter here which one we call A or B, because we just want it to look like this. It has to look like this. So what should I do first? I can move the 52 over. What else do I need to do? I can pair up the like terms, so I'm going to put my y's together, and I only picked the y's just because the y squared came first, but actually I'm going to do the x's first. I'll just keep it so it'll look like the equation above. So I'll put my x's together first. So x squared plus 36x. I know I'm going to have to complete the square, so I'll leave a space there, and then I have y squared minus 10y. And I'm going to complete the square there too. All right, let's complete the square with our x's first. What do I have to do before I complete the square? Take out the 9. So since it's 9x squared, I have to divide both of the x terms by 9 because I need that x squared to have a coefficient of 1. So 9x squared divided by 9 would just be x squared, and then 36x divided by 9 would be 4x. So you have to take out that 9 before you complete the square because that changes the value of b. It will change your whole equation. So you have to take out that 9 first. So in here, I have b over 2 squared. What's my b now? So 4 over 2 squared. 4 over 2 is 2. So 2 squared would be 4. Awesome. I have to make sure I multiply it by this 9 because I'm technically adding 36 on the left side because it'll be 4 times 9. So if I add 36 on the left, I have to make sure I add 36 on the right too. And then what goes into my parentheses squared? X plus 2 squared. And then 9 has to go on the outside. Make sure you keep that there. So let's do the same thing with the y's. So what is my b here? Negative 10. So negative 10 over 2 squared. So that would be negative 5 squared. So I'm adding 25 here. So if I add 25 to the right side, got to make sure I add it to the left side too. And then what's going to go in my parentheses squared? Y minus 5. It's always the squared term and the squared term. And then on the right side, I have to add negative 52 plus 36 plus 25. So that should be 9. Yes. And then what do I need to do? Divide everything by 9. So in my x's here, the 9's will cancel. So that's x plus 2 squared. If you wanted to, you could say x plus 2 over 1, but you don't need to. Sometimes it helps you when you have to find your a and b and things like that, if you wanted to leave the 1 on the bottom, but you don't have to. And then y minus 5 squared over 9 is equal to 1. Don't forget to put that equal to 1 there. Remember last year when I taught this, a lot of people would just forget. It's got to be equal to 1.
Does it have to be in the...
So I'm going to start by graphing to see it a little bit better. And then I also know well, I'm going to graph it first before I write which standard form I'm going to use, because I don't know if it's going to be x squared or y squared yet. So my vertex is at 5, negative 6. So I go to the right 5, down 6. Put a point there. And my directrix is y is equal to 2. So I'm going to go to where y is 2 and put a horizontal line there. Make sure you know when it's y equals or x equals if you have a horizontal line or a vertical line. If you just go to where y is 2, it has to be a vertical line through that point. Because if it was a horizontal line at y is 2, then you're on the y-axis, which wouldn't make any sense.
It's like a downward, right?
Yes, it has to be a downward parabola because it has to open away from the vertex, away from the directrix, away from the directrix.
Why should we do that then?
Because if it's up, it'll cross the directrix.
Oh, it starts like
It's from the vertex, so you start at your vertex and it just has to open away from the directrix. So here, is it going to be an x squared or a y squared? X squared. So my standard form is going to be x minus h squared is equal to 4p times y minus k. Do I know h and k?
Yeah.
Yes, so I'm going to plug those in. So I have h and k come from my vertex, so x minus 5 squared is equal to 4p times y minus negative 6, which would become a plus 6. So next I have to find p. P is the distance from my vertex to the focus or to the directrix. Same thing.
-4. Right?
Nope, we would count.
Oh wait, no, it's -8.
It's going to be 8. How do you know that it's -8?
It's going down.
Because it opens down. So the focus, so from the center to the focus, which would be like down here, because it's always inside your bowl, it's the same distance from the center to the directrix.
Oh, right, because it's the midpoint, right?
Yeah. So if I counted from my vertex to the directrix, I would go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So I know P has to be 8, but we know that it's negative because our graph opens down. So if your graph opens down or to the left, your P is negative. So P is negative 8. So I'm going to plug that in to P. So it's 4P. So 4 times negative 8 would be negative 32. So that's my standard form. So for number 9, am I going to use the x squared one or the y squared one? How do I know I'm using the y squared? Because y is squared. So my equation is going to be y minus what? K, because K always goes with the Y. So Y minus K squared is equal to 4P times X minus H. So I need to get this equation to look like this one. So what should I do? Complete the square. So I need to complete the square with the Y's because that's the one that's squared. And then I'm going to move everything else to the other side. So I'll subtract 4X on both sides and add 3. So negative 4x plus 3 on the right side. I'm going to complete the square on the left. How do I complete the square? B over 2 squared. So this would be negative 6 over 2 squared. So negative 3 squared. So what am I adding on the left side? Adding 9. So I have to add 9 on the right side too. Because x isn't squared. So what goes into my parentheses squared? Y minus 3. Perfect. It's what's squared here and what's squared here. Well, let's add our like terms. So I have negative 4x plus 12. Now my left side looks exactly like I need it to, but my right side, I'm missing those parentheses. Perfect. I want to take out that negative 4. So my left side stays the same, y minus 3 squared. And then I'm going to divide both of these by negative 4 just to pull it out front. So that leaves me x minus 3. So this is my standard form. Yeah. It's not always going to be 4, but you always have to divide out a number. So like whatever your coefficient is here, you want to divide that number out. So it might leave you a fraction here. Bless you. All right, we also want to find our vertex, focus, and directrix. So what's my vertex? 3, 3, perfect. Be careful here because this is H and this is K. Here it just happens to be the same number, but just be careful that it's in a different order here, H and then K. So that's my vertex. To find my focus, I need to know what P is. So this number here is 4P. So 4P is equal to negative 4. So what is P? Negative 1. Focus is the distance, well, P is the distance from the vertex to the focus. So I have to find P to help me find the focus. So I'm going to graph so we can see it a little bit better. So go to the right 3, up 3, put a point there.
There's only going to be 1 point of focus.
Yes. And parabolas, yeah. Yes. Then you would just move the fraction length. So P is negative 1. So in which way is my parabola going to open? How do I know?
It's gonna open down.
Or to the side, left.
It's going to open left because y is squared. So y squared, so that means it's left or right, but p is negative, so that means it's going to open to the left. Now p is the distance from my vertex to the focus. So I'm going to go to the left one spot. So now that point is 2, 3. Perfect. Directrix is in the opposite direction of the focus. So instead of going to the left, which we did for the focus, we would go to the right one for the directrix. And directrix is a line. So what would my directrix be? Perfect. X equals 4. Because it's a line, it's either going to be x equals or y equals. So it's x equals because I go through the x-axis at 4. So for 12, we're moving on to ellipses. We have to find the standard form of an ellipse with the given characteristics. So it doesn't ask us to graph, but I think it's helpful to graph so we can see what we're working with. So my foci are at 2, 1, and 6, 1. So I'm going to go to the right 2, up 1, and go to the right 6, and up 1.
Could you just like know that B is 8?
Yeah, we'll get there. My standard form of an ellipse is x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared is equal to 1. How did I know that a was going to go under the x? Because it's horizontal. Because my foci always fall on the major axis, so I know it has to be a horizontal ellipse. So that means the bigger denominator goes under the x. It's a hamburger. Do I know what h and k are? How do I find the midpoint? Perfect. So I find the midpoint of these 2 points. You can either use the midpoint formula or you can count. I know I have 6 spaces and I have 4 spaces in between. So 2 from the left. 4, 1. So my center would be 4, 1. Everybody understands how I found the center? So that's h and k. So I can plug those in. Yeah. No calculator. All right, next. It tells me that my minor axis length is 16. So I can use my minor axis length to find b because I know that 2b is the minor axis length. So what is b? Perfect. 2b is 16, so divide by 2. b is equal to 8. So if I wanted to, I could plug that into b, or b squared, so that would be 64. B, yeah, because b is the distance from the center to the minor vertices, and it gave us the length of the whole minor axis, so we would just cut that in half to find what from the center to the minor. All right, so last thing we need to do is find a. How do I find a?
You can use the c squared minus a squared minus b squared.
So I'm going to use c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared. I have b, which is 8, so that'll be 64. But I don't know c or a. I can find c using the foci. So c is the distance from the center to the foci. So from the center to the foci is 2. So c is 2. So c squared would be 4. So then I just solve for a squared. So add 64 to both sides. 68 is equal to a squared. I don't really need to find just a because in here I have a squared, so I'm just going to plug that in to there.
Are you doing a video of you put 11 on over?
Yes. So this is my standard form. Any questions? So we have to find the standard form of the equation of ellipse. So my standard form for an equation of the ellipse would be x minus h squared over a squared plus y minus k squared over b squared equals 1. Now I don't know if the bigger number is going to be under the x or under the y, but we'll figure it out and it'll show us at the end. So it really doesn't matter if you use a squared under the x or under the y, because it'll work itself out. So what do I need to do to get this equation to look like this one? Complete the square. So I need to write my x's together and my y's together. So I'll have x squared plus 6x. Leave a space there to complete the square. And then 4y squared minus 8y. Leave a space there. And I'm going to add 3 to the other side. What is the formula that I use to complete the square? B over 2 squared. And what's my b here? So 6 over 2 squared. So that would be 3 squared. So I'm adding 9 on the left side. So I have to add 9 on the right side too. So what's going to go into my parentheses squared? X plus 3. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the y's. Before I complete the square with the y's, what do I have to do? I have to divide both of the numbers by 4 because I need my coefficient for y squared to be 1. So I'm going to take out a 4. So I have y squared minus 2y, and then I have a space there. So I just divided both of these numbers by 4. Then I do the formula. So b over 2 squared, what's b? Negative 2 over 2 squared. So negative 1 squared, which is 1. But I have to make sure I multiply it by 4. So since I have 4 that gets multiplied on the outside, I have to multiply that times 4. So technically I'm adding what here? I'm adding 4. So I have to make sure I add 4 on the right side too. So in my parentheses squared, what am I going to put? Y minus 1. Because it's what's squared here and what's squared there. And then that 4 goes on the outside. So don't forget, if you divide out a number, you have to leave it on the outside.
Like the x or y over b first?
It doesn't matter. Nope. I always put the x's first, but if you wanted to, like if your y had the bigger denominator and you wanted to put that first, that's fine too. It doesn't matter. So then we're going to add these 3 numbers together. So we have 3 plus 9 plus 4, which would be 16. Am I done? No, what do I have to do next? Divide everything by 16. Because it has to be equal to 1. So this would be x plus 3 squared over 16 plus... Perfect. These simplify, so it would be y minus 1 squared over 4 is equal to 1. Do not forget to put that equal to 1 there. So given the equation of the ellipse in standard form, find the following. So find the center, vertices, foci. So right off the bat, we can name our center. So what would our center here be? Negative 3, 5. Perfect. That comes from our h and k. And then to find our vertices, we need a, b, and c. So I'm going to find a, b. Well, we need a and b for sure. But c will help us find our foci. So I'm going to say a equals b equals c equals. How do I find A? A is going to be the bigger denominator, so 25 is A squared. So what is just A? 5. So that means 16 would be B squared, so what is just B? 4. And then how do I find C?
25 minus 16.
So C squared is equal to A squared minus B squared. So C squared will be 25 minus 16, which is 9. So C squared is 9, so what is C? 3. Am I going to have a horizontal ellipse or a vertical ellipse? It's vertical because the bigger denominator is under the y, so that tells me I'm going to have a vertical ellipse. So to help me find my vertices and my foci, I think it's easiest to graph. So again, you don't have to graph any of these, but it really helps to visualize where your foci and where your vertices are going to be. So I'm going to put my center first. So that would be negative 3, 5. So that's the center. I'll find the vertices first. So let's start with the major. A helps me find my major because A is the distance from the center to a vertex on the major axis. So in which direction am I going to go 5? Up, down, left, or right?
You're going to go up.
I'm going to go up 5 because I have a vertical ellipse. So that means my major axis goes up and down. So I'm going to go up 5 and I'll go down 5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And then I go down 5 also. So those 2 points are my major vertices. So my first point would be negative 3, 10. And then the other point would be negative 3, 0. So next, let's find our minor vertices. B is the distance from our center to our minor vertices. So I'm going to go 4 in which direction? 4 to the left and 4 to the right. So I'm going to go 4 to the left from the center and 4 to the right from the center. So my 2 minor vertices are going to be, was at 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So negative 7, 5, and 1, 5. Last thing we have to do is find the foci. So foci, we know, is the center. The distance from the center to the foci is 3. Do my foci go up and down, or are they going to be left and right? Up and down, because your foci are always on the major. Foci are always on the major axis. So from the center, I go up 3, and I'll go down 3. So my 2 points for my foci are going to be negative 3, and then I went up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So negative 3, 8, and negative 3, and I went up 1, 2. So those are the foci. All right, let's also do 14. So what's my center for 14? 0, 0. I'm not adding anything to the x or y, so my center's at 0, 0. So I'm going to graph my center, 0, 0. Now here, the bigger denominator is under the x, so is it going to be a horizontal ellipse or a vertical ellipse? Horizontal. So what's my a? 5, because remember 25 is a squared, so a would be 5. What's my b? 4, because 16 would be b squared, so b is 4. And how do I find c?
It's 3, but you would do that.
So c squared is equal to a squared minus b squared, so c squared is 25 minus 16, which we just did on the last one, so we know c squared is going to be 9, which c would be 3. Alright, so let's start with our major vertices. Remember, A helps us find our major vertices. Bless you. So from the center, which direction am I going to go 5? Do I go up and down 5 or left and right 5? Left and right, because I know my major is on the x-axis, so that means I go left and right. So right 5, left 5. So my two major vertices are going to be 5, 0 and negative 5, 0. All right. Next, let's find our minor. So B helps us find our minor. So where do I go for B? Up and down 4. So go up 4, down 4. So my minor would be 0, 4 and 0, negative 4. And then lastly, I need to find my foci. So what am I going to use to help me find foci?
Your C.
C. C is the distance from the center to the foci. Are my foci going to be horizontal or vertical? Horizontal, because they're always on your major axis. So since my major axis is horizontal, my foci go horizontal. So that means I go to the right 3 and to the left 3. So my foci will be 3, 0 and negative 3, 0. So given the equation of the ellipse in standard form, we have to find the center, vertices, and foci. So right off the bat, I can see my center. What would that be? 0, 0. Now to help me find my vertices and foci, I want to find A, B, and C. So even though it doesn't ask for it, it's going to help us. So I'm going to write it there. Yes. So I'm also going to graph it. Again, even though it doesn't ask for it, I think it's easier to see it when you graph it. So I put my center at 0, 0. Now how do I find A? So
That's A squared.
A squared is 25. A is always bigger than B. So A squared is going to be the 25. So what is just A? 5. So that means 16 is B squared. So B is 4. Do I know if I have a vertical ellipse or a horizontal ellipse? Horizontal. We have a hamburger here. So for my major vertices, which direction do I go? Left and right. So that means I go to the right 5 and to the left 5. So I can look at those 2 points, and that helps me with my major vertices. So it'll be 5, 0 and negative 5, 0. And we need the minor also. And my minor vertices are given by B, so I go up 4 and down 4. So what would the points be? 0, 4, and 0, -4. And then lastly, I'm going to find my foci. So I have to find C. How am I going to find C? C is the distance from the center to the foci. So C squared is equal to A squared minus B squared. So C squared is equal to 25 minus 16. C squared is 9, so what is C? 3. So 3 is the distance from the center to the foci. Am I going to go up and down or left and right? How do you know you go left and right? Because foci are on the major axis. So since our major axis is horizontal, our foci go left and right. So I go to the right 3 and to the left 3. So my foci would be at 3, 0 and -3, 0.